Evolution is the process by which different kinds of living organisms have developed and diversified over time. Life is thought to have started as something small and simple, a common ancestor to all species that exist today. What evidence do we have to support common ancestry and biological evolution over time? While there are multiple lines of evidence to support evolution, let's just look at a few. Comparative embryology is comparing embryos. Look at the 4 different species below. Do you have any idea what species they are? Well, they look almost the same, so you might think they're very similar species, but these actually represent the embryos of a fish, turtle, chicken, and human. These structures here develop into a fish's gills. But in early stages, these structures are also present in reptiles, birds, and even humans. This down here develops into a tail. In the earliest stages of development, tails are found in all vertebrate species, even if they don't grow and develop to actually have a tail. The similarities found in the embryos of species that grow up to be very different are evidence of common ancestry. Now let's look at some fully developed species and think about structural evidence. Who are bears more closely related to, dogs or cats? Well, if I had to take a guess, I would think about who bears are more similar to. Structural evidence, also called anatomical evidence, involves comparing the body structures of organisms. This could include comparing teeth, bones, or organs. For example, while human arms, cat legs, whale flippers, and bat wings have all evolved to perform different functions, the anatomical evidence shows us that we share the same basic set of bones. This is evidence of common ancestry, but it's not just limited to species that have bones. We compare the anatomy of plants too. While structural evidence supports common ancestry, it can sometimes be misleading. Did you know that the closest living relative of a bear is actually a seal? How did we determine that? Well, through DNA evidence. The definition of being related to someone is sharing DNA, your hereditary material. You might be surprised to learn that all life on Earth has genetic sequences that we share. From plants to animals to single-celled organisms, there are genes that we all have in common. What could us humans possibly have in common with bacteria? While complex organisms require many different genes to build their structures, some of the genes for basic cell functions and metabolic processes are found in all life. The strongest and absolute evidence that we have to support common ancestry is the DNA that we share. Organisms that have more genes in common are more closely related. Techniques like gel electrophoresis can be used to compare DNA between species. But what about species from the past? The fossil record is our greatest source of evidence for evolution because it tells us that species from the past were very different than they are today. While the fossil record is incomplete, and we only have fossils for a fraction of species that have existed, we have evidence of change over time. Fossils cannot provide DNA, so scientists analyze the structural evidence to look for similarities and differences, and use chemical evidence to determine the age of the fossils. Our understanding of evolution is supported by multiple lines of evidence. But science, by its very nature, is subject to change. For example, we once considered dinosaurs to be close relatives of today's reptiles. But newly discovered fossil evidence tells us that dinosaurs actually had feathers. We now consider the closest living relative of dinosaurs to be birds, not reptiles. Science is a growing collection of knowledge. We are constantly in search of new evidence to support, reevaluate, or modify what we know today.